I always say at the start of the evening, don't applaud, throw money. All right, I'll lift this again a bit. My village is Ballybucklebow. It is nowhere. It is Brigadoon. It is Glockamara. Can you hear me? You can't. Do I have to say the last one over again? A plea for dialysis, is that what you're saying? Okay? I'm sorry about that. I mean, it's hard. Indeed, if I'm reading, I do try to glance up, but I don't want to lose my place. So if I'm reading and you're losing me, yell, please. Thank you. I wrote a book called Irish Country Christmas, set naturally at Christmas, much to my publisher's horror. Because, you see, you write a book at Christmas, and you put it in the market in October, and you sell your last copy on the 26th of December. Anyway, it came back and fooled them because it did very well last Christmas for me, thank you. And I took as a conceit something a bit odd, like it's my wishful thinking to say writing fiction is in fact writing what you'd like. I'm sure you all know there's been internecine strife in my part of Ireland for God forever. But in 1941 the most remarkable thing happened. The Germans bombed Belfast and my hometown of Bangor. There were refugees, there were people bombed out, and they fled to the countryside, and they were taken in regardless of religious persuasion. And friendships grew up between Catholics and Protestants. They didn't always last, but I've chosen in my fictitious village to maintain that. And because it was such a small village, in 1941, the priest and Presbyterian minister wanted to have a Christmas pageant, but they couldn't because there weren't enough kids. So it isn't place. So they decided to amalgamate, all right? And they had continued this tradition of Christmas Thanksgiving ever since 1941. And I wanted to have a bit of fun with a Christmas pageant. And I think what comes in this scene was originally stimulated my own daughter when she was about 8 on stage with all the little girls dressed as chrysanthemums with great frilly headdresses. And they were singing, I'm picking up a bee, bumblebee. And while they were doing this, 2 little boys dressed as bees were running in and out among the woods, like among the flowers. And they collided. I can tell you one of them had a better straight left than Cassius Clay. So I thought, if these festivals go wrong, maybe my one could go wrong in Ballybucklebow. So bear with me, just till I find it, please. I think it's sad we don't have Christmas festivals in the schools anymore, but society changes. And those of you who can remember them, I've tried to capture it, okay? Miss Nolan, who must have known the words by heart, began to recite. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Barry, who believed he had left religion behind, found he had a lump in his throat and a pricking behind his eyelids as she told the story. In his mind, he repeated the words with her as a concession to the Protestant president. They were the majestic words of the King James Bible, which he had made no conscious effort to learn, but had absorbed in his childhood. And knowing those words were as much a part of Barry Laverty as his blue eyes and fair-haired cowlick. He looked to O'Reilly, and to Barry's surprise, the big man's lips were moving too. They were forming the same words that Barry was hearing from the stage. Into Judea, into the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. The pulleys creaked, the curtains opened. It came as no surprise to Barry that a group of shepherds near the back of the stage sat around a pen of live sheep. Such props would not be hard to come by in Ballybucklebow. A spotlight focused on Joseph, who wore open sandals and a white robe tied at the waist with a piece of rope. The same cordage must have been haggled to tie a checkered hanky round his head for a kafaya. Mickey Corrie led a live donkey by its halter. Mickey, who had been promoted to Joseph this year, thus demoting Colin Brown to the innkeeper. Jeannie Kennedy, wearing a long blue dress up the front of which padding of some sort of big stuff rode slide-so. She touched the donkey's mane and looked to Barry as if she was terrified that she might fall off. The party stopped outside the door over which hung the sign Bethlehem Inn. Oh dear, Mary, everywhere's full. Maybe this inn won't have a room. The lines were delivered in a flat monotone. I hope so, Joseph. Joseph knocked on the door. It was opened by Colin Brown. He was bareheaded and wore a grey robe that looked to Barry as it might have started one of Mrs. Brown's dresses. He sported a blue and white striped butcher's apron. Hello, innkeeper. Colin's smile was beatific. His words enunciated loudly and clearly. Who's there? It's Mary and Joseph. We've come to Bethlehem to be taxed. Mary and Joseph? Barry had harboured a tiny doubt that Colin might try to pull some stunt, but now he relaxed. The little play was going perfectly. Could we have a bed for the night? My wife's having a baby and she's very, very tired. Colin's voice was soft and welcoming. Well, Mary, he emphasised the word Mary, I've known at the inn, but of course you are welcome to go into the stable. Barry stiffened. It wasn't how he remembered the rehearsal. Of course you can, Mary said. And he turned to Joseph and yelled, well, as far as I'm concerned, Joseph, you dirty wee gurrier, you miserable little gobshite, you could just feck off. He glanced at the stage where the players, all save the innkeeper who had a wicked grin, were frozen as in a tableau vivant. Mary's eyes were wide. Joseph looked as if he was ready to kill. A shepherd was on his feet yelling. It must have scared one of the penned sheep, because the animal cleared the hurdle of its pen as easily as a steeplechaser. The sheep collided with the donkey. Barry heard an enormous bray. The donkey, with Mary clinging to its mane, ran up the door to the Bethlehem Inn and knocked the innkeeper flat. Before disappearing into the wreckage of collapsing scenery, he knew he shouldn't, but Barry couldn't stop laughing. He felt a tugging at his sleeve, turned and heard O'Reilly yell above the row, "Come on, Barry, I need a hand. The Mother Superior's fainted." Barry arrived to where O'Reilly was bending over the Mother Superior. He looked up. Simple, syncope, simple faint, he said, would fix her up in no time. Just hold her head so she can't twist away. Barry knelt. O'Reilly bent over to rummage in one pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small glass bottle. He looked expectantly at Barry, who put a hand to each of the nun's temples, then nodded at O'Reilly. The fumes of the smelling salts O'Reilly held under her nose made Barry's eyes water. He'd have used a hand to wipe them away if both weren't occupied restraining the woman. He was surprised by her strength. Her eyelids flew open like two camera shutters. Her eyes were unfocused. O'Reilly removed and recorked the bottle. Barry released her head. "Where am I?" she said in a weak voice. She stared at O'Reilly. "You've no beard." Barry heard her puzzlement. "St. Peter, you've no beard. Glory be." She crossed herself. "Can I come in?" "She fixes at the pearly gates," he realized. But as her question clearly paralleled Joseph's recent inquiry of the innkeeper, Colin Brown, Barry awaited O'Reilly's reply with some trepidation. While he didn't think his colleague was likely to say "feck off," with O'Reilly, you never could tell. So there's the jealousy. Ah, mother's milk. In my previous life, when I used to travel and give lectures about medical research, there were a number of times I used to visit, and I always knew where to get a pint of Guinness. Great bar called Harry Harrington's in San Francisco. And I tottered in there one hot afternoon, and the barman cocked his head. I think he half recognised me. I said, "Pint." He set one up on the counter, and I took a mouthful and put a $5 bill. I said, "Mother's milk." He said, "You might think it is, buddy, but it's gone up to $6.50. I'm going to read you two more scenes. It won't take very long from the Dublin Student Doctor. Maybe you're not getting your money's worth. But I always think having a fellow on the podium going on and on and on can get a bit boring. I find when I read that people have questions about what it's like to be a writer. And so, if I may, I'd like to take a short intermission with you and field a few questions. And I do know, it's extraordinarily difficult to ask the first question. So I'll take the second one. Well done. Second question. How did I end up in Salt Spring? Fulford Ferry. No, I came to Canada 1970. Couldn't hold a job for long. I worked in Ontario, Alberta, went back to England for 2 years. There's a bit in the Old Testament about Moses and Pharaoh, and it says the Lord turned his face away from Moses. He did that to me. Sent me to Winnipeg for 2 years. Sorry if there are any peggers here, but that's the way it is. Oh, I know they're two. They've forgiven me. They're my friends. They've forgiven me already. And then the Red Sea parted, and I fetched up in Vancouver. And a member of my staff persuaded me that he lived on Bowen Island. I was working at St. Paul's, and I might like it over there. And so I went and lived on Bowen Island. Dorothy and I went back to Ireland for a couple of years recently. And then we decided to come back to Canada. And we thought, as I had this thing now about islands, we hoped Salt Spring would let us in. We're very grateful that we did, I think. That's how we got here. Yes, sir.
Oh, Patrick, your books are mostly about the 50s, and they run into the 60s and 70s. We got coal fires.
Sorry, Bill?
Coal light lamps. Can you hear okay?
I'm having a little trouble.
Okay. What's the time of
The time frame of my books?
Yeah, 50s?
No,
60s?
no. The first, well, the 4 books set in Ballybuckle Bow, and that's Country Doctor, Country Village, Country Christmas, Country Courtship, all run over a 12-month period from 1964 to 65. Mrs. Kincaid's book runs from 1922 to 1928, I believe. I could be a little off on that. I gave myself terrible trouble when I created Mrs. Kincaid. I wanted to be a Cork woman. I had never actually been to County Cork. But I'd just seen the movie Michael Collins. And he was shot in a place called Bianaglaw, which means mouth of the flowers. It's really rather lovely. It's a typically Irish crossroads. It's got 5 roads, not 4, that run into each other. And so in the first book I said Mrs. Kincaid came from a farm near Bianaglaw. That's okay. And I didn't, in any of these books, want to dwell on the Irish troubles. I've written some thrillers about the Irish troubles. In these I wanted to get away. So suddenly I find myself, this Kinky Kincaid, growing up on a farm in 1922, near Bianaglaw, where Michael Collins was assassinated in August. How do you get around that? I think I managed, but I really painted myself into a corner. This book is another backstory. It's the story of Dr. Fingal O'Reilly as a medical student in Trinity College, Dublin. And again, I was stuck from the first book, because when the young man goes into his surgery, there hanging on the wall was O'Reilly's diploma, his medical degree, dated 1936. Now, that got me stuck, because in those years, it was a 5-year course at Trinity College, and the kids went, like myself, went straight from high school to medical school.